All right. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to another week of Slamazon Bros Live. Very excited to have you join us. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of managing your Amazon inventory and the Amazon seller's supply chain, really. Before we get into that, we just want to say that we really appreciate if you can give the video a thumbs up on YouTube and if you leave a comment with what you liked about the show or with any questions that you have. So if you are selling on Amazon or you're planning to sell on Amazon, it is really important that you manage your inventory well, especially since most of us are using Amazon FBA. This is really important. Managing your inventory well is a piece of the Amazon supply chain for your business, and it's crucial for acquiring inventory, limiting storage costs, avoiding going out of stock, making sales, and really just affecting the bottom line profit of your business. So I'm just going to go through a couple of practical ways before Andy gets into this of how you can handle your inventory well before Andy gives us some more tips of what you can do in your actual account. So if you are doing retail or online sourcing, this might look a little bit different to you because, most of those people are constantly acquiring different inventory or new inventory. However, most people who are doing retail and online sourcing still have a number of items that they purchase frequently. I know I do, that are referred to as replenishable items usually. And, if you do this, you want to have a system in place to check your inventory levels on these items and really understand how long it takes for you to replenish those items, get new ones into the Amazon warehouse. So let's say, I'll just give a little example here. That I have a replenishable item that sells one a day and I purchase it from Walmart online. And if it takes Walmart 6 or 7 days to ship that item to me, and then it takes me another 6 or 7 days to send the item to the Amazon warehouse and actually get checked in, and that varies and changes, of course, each time depending where you're sending it. But then I know that I need at least 12 to 14 day lead time to replenish those items, if they're starting to go out of stock. If that item sells one a day again, then I definitely need to reorder that item as soon as it gets to about 20 products or lower because I know I need at least 12 or 14 days to get new items in. Now, real life doesn't work as cleanly as that, I understand. And, things change and more than one sells a day. You don't know exactly how much is selling. But if you start to really analyze this and then use some of the tools Andy's going to talk about, some information Amazon gives you, you can start to track your products, and over time, it's kind of like how you average things over time. The data really starts to make more sense the longer you're looking at it, and it's easier to predict, when you need to replenish your inventory. Now, for wholesalers and private label sellers, this is even more important because usually we're dealing with, many items or a larger quantity with any given particular SKU. So you want to have a good estimate of how long it takes from the time you order your product until it reaches the Amazon warehouse. This is really important so that you can avoid going out of stock. So Andy and I were just talking about this before. He has a product that it takes him, 6 or 7 weeks to ship by boat. So he needs to have a good idea of how long that's going to take so he doesn't go out of stock on the item. And when you go out of stock, it's really like losing sales. If you are consistently getting sales and you got out of stock, most businesses will count that as a loss. Not only that, but for private label sellers, it can mean that the rank of your listing plummets, and that can be tough to recover. So that's another really important reason why you don't want to go out of stock. Now, why can't you just over-order products and have tons and tons sitting in the warehouse? Well, then usually you run into, depending on your item, either some kind of costly storage or this may impact your cash flow situation. So if you have a limited cash flow situation, you don't want to spend all your money on product that's just going to be sitting in the warehouse and not selling. You'd rather be efficient with your inventory, get it in and get it out in an efficient manner. And what this all comes to is how efficient you can be with your inventory and your capital. So that's kind of my feel for the beginning of this. And Andy, I'll let you take it away with your tips and then some of the tools and some of the ways that we can practically look at this.
Sure. So, hey, if you guys have any questions at all, they don't have to be specifically in regards to supply chain management or inventory. You can put them right here in the chat box. If you look up at the question box, if you type in /Q, when you put your question in there, it's going to automatically go into the question box so it doesn't get lost in chat. So if you have questions about anything as we are talking, and again, it can be anything related to Amazon, feel free, put those in there, and Nate and I will answer them toward the end of the show. So, hey, the topic is not a very sexy topic, right? We're not talking about something that has a lot of sizzle today. However, I would say that to execute this effectively is your business really hinges on how you control your supply chain management and how you control the flow of your inventory. It's something that when I started selling on Amazon, I didn't realize how important controlling inventory and controlling the supply chain was. I'm not sure what I had in my head, if I thought Amazon was like a book selling place or what. I didn't realize how blue collar being an Amazon seller is. And so I was unprepared when I first started for how many calluses I was going to have on my hands. I was unprepared for how many cardboard cuts, right? Now, I worked at a grocery store when I was younger for 4 years, from my freshman year in high school to my senior year in high school. And, every week at that grocery store, we would get a huge semi truck full of product that all of the stock boys would have to unload. And so it was a weekly delivery, right? And if that truck didn't show up, then the shelves on that grocery store, they were going to be emptied out, right? And so we were dependent upon that truck, right, to keep our shelves full. Well, as Amazon sellers, it's the same kind of way. We need to be sending, right, that inventory in on a weekly basis. If we're not, then our store is going to be empty. The trick is selling and sending in profitable inventory and acquiring inventory that is sellable. And so there are some new sellers that are like, man, hey, Andy, I've been sending stuff in, but it's not selling. And a lot of times what happens is people think that they can just send anything in and it's going to sell. And that's not the case. You have to send in inventory that Amazon sellers are going to be putting in that search bar. And so that's the goal for you and I, right? The goal is that we're going to send in good sellable inventory that's going to sell, right, within at least 6 months. And so if you're a new seller on Amazon, just know that you want to sell through your inventory that you have at FBA within 6 months. Because if you don't, and you have multiples of it, that means you have more than one, Amazon is going to assess a long-term storage fee that is really expensive. Paying the short-term fees up to 6 months are really negligible. They're not that much, and so you don't have to worry about those. But if you're going to go above 6 months, right, with multiples, you don't want to do that. You're going to have to recall that inventory yourself. So that's the number one thing you always want to have in your head. I want to sell through whatever inventory you're sending into FBA. You want to have in your head you're going to sell through it within 6 months, okay? And so managing those inventory levels is the key to running a successful Amazon business. And there are kind of two schools of thought when it comes to inventory: going wide and going deep on products. And again, if you're a new seller, you'll hear this. Some sellers like to go wide because they feel that they're not going to get burnt. Say if Amazon comes in on the listing, right? Or say if consumer demand starts to die out, and maybe there's a lot of competition that all of a sudden pops up. And so you're stuck sharing the buy box with a lot of other sellers, and there's less demand. Therefore, a lot of people will say go wide. And actually, I think that if you're a newer seller, this is the way I always recommend to kind of get into selling on Amazon, is you want to go wide at first because you're just learning how to analyze your buys, right? How to pick the good buys from the bad buys. And so, going wide, only buying 5 to 7 of an item, you're kind of testing the waters and you're figuring out what's going to sell. You're figuring out what the sales velocity is going to be. And so if you're just starting out, that's what I definitely encourage you to do, is go wide on products or in a category. Don't go deep until you know exactly what you're doing. So that way you're not getting stuck with inventory that may be dead, stale inventory. Where I'm at, right, being a seller for 3 years, I definitely like to go deep. I find that it's a lot easier to manage inventory if I can send in 1,000 units of something as opposed to just sending in 10. However, I have to be sure that I'm going to be able to sell through that 1,000 units within 6 months, or I'm going to be stuck recalling inventory, or I'm going to be getting assessed those high long-term storage fees. So, just have that in your head as part of the supply chain management is you always want to be able to sell through that inventory that you're sending in within 6 months. Okay. So my first tip is that especially if you're just starting out, understand what it means to go wide. Don't go really deep on a product, where you're buying 500 units of something until you get to the point where you're really confident in knowing that that's going to sell through. All right. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is this. Use Amazon's data to help you make those informed decisions. Nate and I were just talking about before the show, Amazon, the Seller Central just keeps getting better and better. On my private label products now, they can tell me down to the day. They give me a guesstimate of how much longer my inventory is going to remain in stock. And so it would be really foolish of me not to use their data because they're the ones that have access to all the information. They can look back at my 6-month average and see how many units I've sold. I can look back on Amazon and see how many units I've sold. And so sometimes what happens with Amazon sellers, we get caught up so much in sending inventory in that we don't step back and see what our inventory is telling us. And so, if you're at that level, I definitely encourage you to step back and see what your inventory is telling you. Because you know what? A year ago, your inventory may have told you something totally different, and you may still be operating off of what that inventory told you a year ago. And so unless you step back and analyze the data of what your inventory is telling you today, do not go off of what it told you a year ago. I've had to do that on a number of my products that I think the sell-through velocity is a lot higher, but really what I'm going off of is old data. And so I've had competitors come in, and so they're getting squeezed that way. My sales are getting squeezed. Therefore, so when I make my next order for my supplier, I have to order less of that item. So you don't want to go off of old data. Make sure you're looking at what your inventory is telling you on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis. So that way you're not going to get stuck ordering 1,000 of something, because the whole key behind supply management is you want to have just enough inventory, right? You don't want to order too much because that's capital then that's tied up. You want to order just enough. What I like to do is I like to stay about my best sellers. I like to stay at least a month out, right? Everything else, I want to stay like 2 to 4 weeks out, because you don't want to tie up your capital. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is this when it comes to supply management, I think. Understand that 20% of your inventory is going to make you 80% of your product. 80% of your profit. So, you really need to pay attention to that 20%, and you need to massage that 20%. You need to add, variations of that 20%. You need to see what you can do to build that 20% out. So I have a product. I noticed right away it was my number one seller. So what did I do? I created 2 other product pages with variations and basically bundles of it. And it continues to be my number one product. Now, I could have left that alone. I could have said, hey, look, this is my best-selling product. I'm not going to touch it. But you know what? I want to grab up more real estate. This is a great product. And so I had 1 product page, and now I have 3 product pages of this same product, but in different variations. And that's what you want to do. You want to find out what your top 20% is that's making you 80% of the 80% of your profit, and then you want to build that out. Don't just leave that alone. That's something that Amazon consumers and customers are looking for. So you want to grab up more real estate with that. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, here's tip number 4. You want to run your account lean and mean. Get rid of your slow selling inventory. And so, people will say this a lot of times, don't fall in love with your product, right? Sometimes what used to be your best sellers become dead dogs, but yet you still want to kind of cling to them. You got to release them and you got to let them go. Get rid of your dead dogs. Get rid of your old product that is not profitable anymore. You just got to say bye-bye to it and then move on to some other stuff. Don't fall into that trap. A lot of people do. And I like to run my account lean and mean. Now, I'm not saying get rid of like your long tail items. Maybe some product that you purchased at a really good price and the margins are there. And, you understand that it may take a year to sell it. And again, I'm not talking about multiples either. So hold on to those. But if you have product, right, that is just kind of eating up space, but has become unprofitable, and everyone has those. Like, why keep them in your inventory? They're just a distraction. Get rid of them. All right. So keep your account lean and mean. Tip number 5 is this. Nate talked a little bit about this at the beginning. Know how long that it takes to get your product from the supplier to the Amazon warehouse. And then this is what I say, then add 3 weeks to it, because you always have to plan for hiccups. All right. Especially if you're like me and you're ordering from China, which the majority of my product come from China and India. I always add 3 weeks onto that timeline of whatever Amazon is telling me I have before I go out of stock. And for the most part, that's always served me well. So, understand how long it's going to take for you to place that, or after you place that order, and especially if they have to manufacture the product, understand how long that's going to be, and then add 3 weeks to it. And if you do that and you go by those kind of guidelines, it should give you enough time to be able to get that product into the Amazon warehouse. So that's really all I had about inventory, supply chain management. Again, it's not very sexy, but if you're just getting into selling on Amazon, just know that in your head, this is a huge piece of your business. You have to be able to manage this right.
Yeah, that was good. We have a couple questions here. So guys, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or do the /Q and ask more questions. We'll answer a couple of the questions we have here. Anything else you want to add to that, Andy, or go right into these questions?
Let's go right into the questions.
Yeah. So someone asked, for supply chain from China, should we ramp up for the fourth quarter? Now, I think that's kind of on an individual item listing basis, I would say. I know that one of my private label items this last fourth quarter that you wouldn't even think of as a fourth quarter item, really. It wasn't a toy. It's in the home and kitchen category. So, it's not really like a fourth quarter item in my opinion, but my sales skyrocketed in November and December. They went from, I'm not even sure, like only selling like 40 a month to I sold over 300 in November and December. So it kind of depends on the item. Definitely. It depends on what it is, because not all items are going to jump up in the fourth quarter. But in my experience of selling for years, and I think, Andy, you'd say the same thing, everything sells more in the fourth quarter. So it's, everything seems to do, 3 times. Is that your rule usually? Yeah. And for things like toys, it's going to be even more than 3 times. But even non-toys, in my experience, have sold much more in December. So it's hard to say how much to ramp it up, but I would definitely see myself ramping up most of my private label items in the fourth quarter. So Tina's asking, saying that they're still working on their first order, $1,000 available for the first purchase, regarding inventory and with the goal of 5,000 monthly revenue. I think this is the question, should I maintain inventory minimum at 10,000 a month plus? So that's hard to say. It all depends on the items. And I don't know if you have anything on that you would want to say, but to get 5,000 monthly revenue in of sales, would you say you want at least $10,000 worth of inventory in the warehouse?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, because that's actually a question that a lot of Amazon sellers will talk about. I'm thinking that if I have $100,000 worth of inventory in the Amazon warehouse, I can expect about $30,000 a month in total revenue. And I think that's pretty accurate. And again, obviously I have to have inventory that's selling,
Yeah.
like I just can't pick anything. But, if you're making good buying decisions, I think you can pretty much count on if you're loaded up with like $100,000 worth of sellable inventory in the Amazon warehouse, that you're going to sell between 20 and 30,000 a month.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm having a hard time with it, because it really just depends this is more of how quickly your inventory sells. This is more of the, how fast of a turnover you had. And I did want to touch on that as well. But yeah, if you have $10,000 of inventory and it's a real slow moving inventory, it's hard to say what your revenue is going to be. And what I wanted to touch on just was, the whole inventory turnover, because that's what this is all about. Some people too, you talked about the going wide or going deep. A lot of sellers have. The other philosophy with selling, besides the wide and deep, is the, fast turn versus long-term hold strategy, basically. So some people like to turn their inventory over very quickly. And if you're doing that, basically your lead time for items is going to be much shorter, because your inventory is turning over so quickly that you don't have as long of time to get new inventory into the warehouse. So if you have a fast turn model or strategy, you have to be even more careful with not going out of stock, because that can really hurt you if you go out of stock with a fast turn model. XL Radio asks about drop shipping. We do not do drop shipping, either of us. How that works is basically people list something on Amazon, and when it sells, they ship it from another supplier to the customer, and they never touch it themselves. Or they sell their items on another platform and they use Amazon as the fulfillment channel, and they multi-fulfillment that item to another place. So that's drop shipping, really. It's finding an arbitrage opportunity and never touching the product, really. We had another question about long-term storage fees. So we've hit this on a couple of our old shows. Danny was asking this one. Let's just clarify this again. For those who are interested in long-term storage fees, there's actually 2 times during the year that Amazon assesses long-term storage fees, in February and August, I believe. So if you have during those 2 times, it's 2 days in the year. Once those days hit, if you have inventory that has more than one of a particular SKU, and it's been in the Amazon warehouse for longer than 6 months, then it's considered long-term storage, or it's eligible for a long-term storage fee. So if you send an item in right after that day in February, you technically have almost a whole year before you get assessed those fees, because in August, you won't be at 6 months, you'll be at 5 months and 20 something days or whatever. I'm just hypothetically, you send the item right after that date. So it's not like every month you get a long-term storage fee over 6 months. It's twice a year. So there's some wiggle room in there. Just know that those long-term storage fees are much more than the monthly storage fee, although the monthly storage fee does add up. So once you start getting more and more inventory, if you have as much inventory as a big seller, like as much inventory as Andy, or if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory, even those monthly fees can add up. So that's why we're saying it's important not to have an overabundance of inventory in the warehouse. You want to have just enough. That was the key. And Andy hit on that a lot, so I'm not going to say it much more, but if you can, you want to have just enough. And of course, that's the real question, is what's just enough? That's what you have to figure out. But that's what's really important.
So Nate Pintech has a question. I'm going to let you answer this because I think you have a better handle on it. It says, for RA, is there a good way to prove authenticity of a product beyond the receipt if you get hit with an inauthentic claim from an Amazon customer?
That's a really tough thing with RA, is that there's not, you'll hear a lot of people say one of the troubles with RA is you don't have as much protection almost, or proof of purchase. You can have that receipt, but Amazon doesn't always, really consider receipts the most, they don't really care about receipts as much as they do an invoice. That's why for private label products, you usually feel like you can prove the authenticity of your items better because of the invoice. That is a trouble with RA, and people kind of complain about that sometimes. The only other thing I can think of that people try to do to help with that is you can take, pictures of your product before you send them. But once you get to a certain level of selling, if you're a big seller, that can be really difficult to take pictures of every single product you have. But that would possibly be one way. But you definitely want to maintain those receipts. That's better than nothing. And I've seen people, get off of inauthentic claims with receipts just from retail stores. So you definitely want to have those. That's important. But it's not really as good as private label or wholesale where you have that invoice from a manufacturer or authorized supplier.
So Donald asks, what kind of analytic tools do you use? Donald, I just actually use Seller Central, what Amazon gives us. I find theirs to be the most accurate. And so, yeah, I don't depend on any other third-party services right now as far as it comes to supply chain management.
I will say that I use my inventory lab. Andy and I both use Inventory Lab, which is it's helps you to list, it helps you as accounting features. I will use Inventory Lab and kind of look through my inventory, and I will use that sometimes for supply chain or inventory management because it sometimes can give you an easier look of, how well things are selling. So this is where I use Andy. You talked about the 20% and really taking care of your top 20% products. That's what I like to use Inventory Lab for, because you can't really tell what your top 20% products are, at least for profit, just on Amazon. But if you go to Inventory Lab, or if you have another tool that does accounting, for you or tracks your profit, you get a better idea of what your top 20% is. When using Inventory Lab, if you unsubscribe, will your inventory be affected on Amazon? Your inventory won't be affected. You just won't have the same tracking capability that Inventory Lab provided to you. And if you go to Inventory Lab, they have some of those questions right on their website about that. We had another question. You have a server on Amazon Web Service and you set it up, but you can't get to work now. I don't think either of us are really going to know much about that, the server's fault. It seems like whenever I hear people talking about that, Amazon is, frequently changing things as far as web services go. So I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon made a change, because sometimes they honestly don't like some of those services set up, so they'll just change something and it won't work anymore. But I don't think either of us are going to know too much more about that. Maybe in the group we can give a little more info on that. I think any more questions, guys? We're about to wrap up on time here. We try to keep these shows under 30 minutes, but we will take another question or two if anyone has one. But I'll just say this: we'll look for another question. But I'll just say, like Andy said, that's not the most exciting of topics, but it's really important. So we try to keep these shows short, and we try to keep them informative, not a lot of fluff, because we just want to hit you with some of the important things that you want to use to manage your business well. You got to be efficient. You got to work hard. And these are some of the reminders that we all have to be aware of all the time. But we just also want to say, check out slamazonbros.com, our website, and then also check out on the Getting Started page, the Slamazon Bros Mastermind group. So this mastermind group has started just in the last couple of weeks, but it's already getting off to a really great start. It's basically it's Andy and I, and then a bunch of like-minded sellers that are talking about these kind of topics every single day. We're getting some really good questions, some good threads and topics in there. So check out the mastermind group. You can see that on slamazonbros.com and above here. But I think that's all for today. We appreciate your guys' attention. We appreciate if you can hit the like button on YouTube, and if you subscribe to our channel to follow us. And one thing I did want to let you guys a little sneak peek. Andy and I have another show that's going to be coming out here soon. We're really excited about it. It's going to focus on private labels specifically. It's going to be separate from this show, but make sure that you're subscribed to us on YouTube so that you are catching when that show is going to be released. We're excited about it, and we think it's going to be a lot of fun for people. But I think that's going to do it for us today. Thanks everyone that joined us live, and thanks for watching, and that's it.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good week.
Yep. Bye.